First gentleman I'm going to introduce is well known as Zephania Opati. Mr. Opati is going to present a very interesting topic. And this topic is about entrepreneurship. So what he's going to talk about is tolling strategies. What entrepreneurs can learn from terrorists about corporate strategy. All right? So Mr. Opati, without further ado, you can be setting up as I talk about you. So Mr. Opati is currently the head of department, Riara School of Business. He holds a Bachelor Degree in Business Administration Marketing from Maseno University, an MBA from University Teknologi Mara Malaysia, and is currently pursuing Ph.D. in Marketing at St. Paul's University. He has taught Riara University and Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology. He has consulted for United Nations Volunteer Association and Global Village Publishers. Yes. $1 million? $2 million? Okay, you're good. So he has contributed widely in Business Daily. That's a daily that actually talks about business. I'm sure Kenyans are well aware with it. About it. Society of Kenya Sokoni magazine and Diplomat East Africa and the African Executive. He has published 2 books, Personal Branding, King Solomon Way in 2012, and The Terrorist in the Boardroom, 2016. Commonwealth scholar, a member of the Chartered Institute of Marketers, UK. He is also a member and serves as the election board member of Academy of International Business, AIB, sub-Sahara chapter. His interest is in branding, strategy, and international marketing.
Afternoon, everyone. My interest in this area happened at one point. I was at Kilimani Police. Okay. I was at Kilimani Police, and I had taken my cousin there to pick her car because it was towed by the police to that police station. So when we were there, we heard that the Westgate attack had happened. And I was asking myself, how strategically were these guys to plan something like that in a well-known shopping mall in Kenya and execute it in a strategy that left the whole system shaken? So that's where I started my studies, and I realized that these studies actually, or these strategies, actually seem to be plagiarized or copied from the Boardroom. Fortune 500 companies tend to execute this strategy. There's a concept that's coming up. While the common entrepreneur, the marketer, is selling his brand beyond reasonable doubt, the terrorist is selling his beyond unreasonable belief. He's moving forward from proof to something beyond proof. This is belief. That's what you're talking about. And kindly notice that to convince a person to join such an organization, it's not an easy task. And that's what I'm getting that line from. So let's look at strategies. I won't take more of your time. But the first one which you've covered and which I've said is the selling beyond reasonable doubt versus selling beyond reasonable belief. Really realize here the fact that they're using religion. It's appealing to more than emotion or feeling. It's appealing to a belief. And that's what most of us are not looking at in terms of being entrepreneurs. The thing is, when you're getting into a business or you're getting into an entrepreneurship activity, are you pouring your heart and soul into it? Because that's what these people do, and these people tend to greatly do their business quite well in terms of their strategies. So the idea of it is that if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a businessman, it's not an afterthought. It should not be an afterthought. If you're in tech business or data mining, for example, what he presented, it should be like an extension of your life, not just a part of your life. So the next thing we are looking at is a strategic plan versus strategic planning. So some of us may have a strategic plan, but the key thing is in strategic planning. As alluded to the video that you saw, Westgate was planned. Remember, I was doing this research for like a year and a half. Westgate was planned for 1 year, with these guys, reports indicating that some actually were tenants, understanding the security lapses within the building, taking 1 year, renting out that space. For the September 11, it was 20 years. If you look at how these guys were able to plan, because the Senate proceedings that were put in the Guardian were able to prove that there was what do you call it? A critical planning. The idea, the first one, was to pledge 10 planes in both Asia and America. But Osama bin Laden saw that this was going to be a very difficult issue to coordinate. So these guys rented a place, even returned the excess money before the day they were supposed to execute the whole thing. They went in, trained as pilots, and that's what I'm trying to talk about. If you're getting into business, how much of strategic planning are you doing? Are you thinking 20 years? Are you thinking 10 years? What are you actually doing in terms of planning? Then the next point is business as usual or business unusual. So looking at that picture, someone has already thought of business unusual, having a hotel room outside a mountain, okay? So at the end of the day, the business that you're doing or the business that you're planning to do, what difference or what different, how is the business different from the rest? Okay? Because when these guys are planning, they're not planning something normal. Every time they come up, that's why security forces all over the world will be keen on following what are the new strategies terrorists are coming up with, because one way or another, it will catch them off guard. So that's the idea. If you're coming up with business, you know, at the end of the day, what is the real difference it makes within the population of the customers? So here, borrowing from the book, Life in Half a Second, the guy asked, or the guy found out during his small research, that if you're given 1 year to live, people tend to change their habits, they change the way they live. Some things become a priority. So at the end of the day, such guys have that mind that they have a short life. Whatever they are going to achieve, whatever they are going to do, it must be exceptional. So that's what I'm trying to pass across here. Then the issue of focus. And you realize, even with the terrorist cells, there is a focus in terms of geographical places they operate on. There is also a focus in terms of the way they operate or the way they execute their evil mandates. So focus becomes an important factor. Looking at the life of entrepreneurs, like for example, there is a documentary called The Men Who Made America. And borrowing from that, there is Cornelius Vanderbilt was focused so much on the railroad. John Rockefeller was a guy who was in the oil industry. Kanji, steel tycoon. JP Morgan, investment banking. So even with these guys, they have a focus. And that's what I'm trying to pass across as entrepreneurs. What is your focus? You can see this young chap here, 13 years old, already has been, you know, mentored into a life that is easily focused than most of us when we reach about 18 or 20 is when we want to try to figure out what we are going to do. The next bit is the language versus the voice of the brand. For those who are familiar with Wimpy, his language is burgers. Okay? At one time, I remember reading those clips, and when he went out on a date with a lady, he explained to the lady, you know, the history of burgers. When was the biggest one? When was the first one made? And the lady said, please, kindly give me a break. Never call me again. Because all you talk is about burgers. So when you talk about the language, what kind of communication are you putting on as an entrepreneur? What kind of, you know, expression are you putting on? Okay, if you talk, this is what Mandela said, if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his own language, that goes to his heart. So the idea is, even if you're communicating as a brand, what kind of consistency message or consistent message, are you passing across? So at the end of the day, if you look at Mercedes-Benz, their language is luxury, expensive, but that whatever, if they come up with a motorcycle, that motorcycle will represent what they focus on or what they do, their image, bluntly. Then we have the brand naming system. And this is what I was talking about in terms of the terrorist cells. Boko Haram, Western education is illegal or forbidden. At the end of the day, whatever they do is try to disrupt education system in Nigeria. You remember the girls who were hijacked and taken away from their parents from a school, because that's their consistency with their brand. It shows whatever strategy they are going to use. You talk about Taliban, it means the student. Al-Shabaab, the youth. So even in their recruiting, they will never pick somebody above the age of even 30 or 25. They target the young people because that's the language they want. I mean, that's the language the brand speaks. So at the end of the day, it must be consistent with what they're trying to do. They have to remain true to their philosophy and also their ideology in terms of what identity are you passing across. Is it consistent with what you believe? Is it consistent with your strategy? Is it consistent with your tactics? So at the end of the day, it must be clear. Even the law enforcers or security apparatus around the world, if something happens, they can say, this is a signature of this group because there is a consistency in what they do. Then, timing versus time. This one I borrowed from although it's clear, whenever they attack, they're also consistent with their timing. If it's an army barracks, like in Kenya, we've seen so much cases, it happens at night. If it's an attack during for the common man, you know, the attack will happen during the day, but in a place where there is maximum casualties that can be experienced. So if it's a place where it's fortified, the attack usually carries out in the morning, very early in the morning, or during the night. So timing, as I get to this one, the Chinese have a concept called the 888 system. And that explains why the Beijing Olympics was held on 8th of August in 2008. They believe for you to have a very good life, you must have 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours of rest, and 8 hours of socialization. But looking at different businesses, I realized that all these businesses also have an 8-hour profitable period that you make. For instance, a supermarket, for example, in Kenya, the operations, a lot of operations start at around 3 p.m. to around 10. A radio station has split it, in Kenya, radio station have split it into two, from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Then when people are driving back home from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. So they've split their 8 hour into two sessions. So when you go to work, like the common one is classic, they'll have two presenters who may be to attract large crowds to listen to them. So at the end of the day, every industry has an 8-hour period that is profitable to them, because that becomes the issue of the timing. And that's what I'm trying to say. What is the 8-hour period or maximum time that you can use to be able to, I don't know what's happening here on the other one, okay? But what is the 8 maximum period that you can use to make profit as a business? Then we're looking at diversification versus redefining the business. Let me ask a question maybe to the as I engage the audience. How do you put 8 Hondas in one room? How do you put 8 Hondas in one room? Anybody? In one room. Hey, you're heading somewhere. Yes? Okay. Because ideally, businessmen will say that if you want to maximize or you want continuity of a company, companies like IBM, Coca-Cola, which are 200 years in the market or over, these companies, some of them have diversified. But now we are looking at a new concept called redefining your business. Now, if I'm going to redefine a business, or that was what Honda was doing, is you can have a car in that room. Is it true? You can have a motorcycle. You can have a lawnmower. You can have a generator. You can have a ski. You can have a powerboat. So at the end of the day, the redefinition of the business is around the engine. Are we together? So that Honda focuses on making the engine rather than on focusing on just making the car or the motorcycle. So at the end of the day, this concept or core competency of this business can be in making the engines, but you outsource the rest of the processes. So if it is the design of the car, we can outsource. But when it comes to the engine, we make sure our engineers or these guys who are working on it are actually working towards thinking of coming up with another engine. Last year, they came up with a private jet because the key concept is looking at the engine. The same thing has happened with Safaricom, and that's why I tend to attribute the profitability of Safaricom in Kenya because of the redefining a business. At first, their business was communication. I have a SIM card, I call people, I receive text. But now using that SIM card, their business has been redefined to transaction. I can transact data. I can transact voice. I can transact, now this is what I was saying for Honda. You're able to have all those equipments in one room because you've redefined your business. The same I was talking about Safaricom. You can transact M-Pesa using your SIM card. You can send data. I mean, you can use the internet. You can use the voice in terms of that kind of business. So we all have to think of redefining the business in that terms. Then, one more concept or another concept is the craze of employment versus the deployment of the crazy. It is, most people attribute it to Steve Jobs, but there was this quote from the Apple company that says, the people who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones who actually do. Okay? Looking at the statistics, 2/3 of the terrorists, 25 terrorists involved in the planning of 9/11 attended university. Okay? But there was a major trend concerned about this because engineers if you talk about the whole population, engineers make up 3.5%, okay? But in terrorists, engineers make up 20% of the population. Those who have been arrested or those who are known. So when they are picking people, they are not picking just anybody. You get my point? The one who instigated the Garissa attack, for those guys who are able to know about it, was a trained lawyer in Kenya. Okay? Osama was an engineer. His deputy, Al-Awi, was a surgeon. So what I'm trying to say is, even as entrepreneurs, whenever we are picking employees or people who are working, we don't go for the low quality. We go for the people who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world. Then the other concept is human beings. That should be human beings versus human becoming. And it has been noted, and I put those two products in the intention to prove this point. When you look at Colgate, Colgate doesn't advertise to grown-ups, especially in the Kenyan market. It tends to focus on children. So at the end of the day, you focus on what we call cradle to the grave. You get a customer for life. Research has shown that companies that have embedded the mind of a child at the age of 5, and this child at the age of 5 has 200 products that he or she can relate to. Chances are these 200 products, the child can be a customer for life. And that's why now it explains companies like Harley-Davidson, they're able to venture into toys so that to attract this child as early as possible. Why? Because if you look at the terrorists, the indoctrination of them to get into their business is done at the child level. Is it true? They start early. They don't wait, or they don't mostly look for grown-up. So at the end of the day, companies that work well will be companies that will be able to focus on getting children at an early age so that you embed that. And you can see Dettol has started focusing that by putting children in the advert, because you're able to put that in the mind of the child. Then we have the consumer concept versus the producer concept. This is a new thing that is going on. Instead of you just producing for the consumer to take, you engage the consumer in the production process. A good example in Kenya I can give is the Classic FM. Now, they will start a discussion, and you as a consumer who's supposed to consume these products, you are engaging by calling. So at the end of the day, the experience or the product becomes the part of experience for you. Are we together? The product is a platform for them to sell an experience to you. And that is what I had for you today. Thank you. Any question?
Thank you.